NCAA college basketball players are seen as the people everyone wants to be and are groomed for a lifetime of fame and millions of dollars when they go pro, right? Except it isn't that simple. NCAA players are monstrously exploited, with some of them who are literally starving at night while the NCAA makes billions of dollars from the revenue the players bring in.
The Me Too movement has now come to basketball. NBA dancers are speaking up about being subjected to body shaming and making less than minimum wage. As Megan Alexander reports, their complaints echo similar charges NFL cheerleaders made against their league.
The NBA dancers fire up the crowds from the sidelines. But now, some of the dancers say there's a dark side to their job.
We've worked our entire lives to have this dream job, and then we get there and we're treated like crap.
Chanel Young spent 3 seasons dancing for the Utah Jazz. She says while her overall experience with the NBA was positive, she says there were rigid weight requirements the women had to meet.
We still had weigh-ins once a month. We always got weighed in, and I know that some women went into that room and came out feeling really beaten emotionally.
On paper, looked amazing. The school's website showed a campus filled with beautiful buildings, manicured trees, and perfectly trimmed grass. Private schools in the US issue what's called an I-20, offering international students a visa to study at that school. And so, armed with her hoop dreams, her newly issued visa, and a one-way ticket, Blessing left Nigeria for the first time in her life and landed in New York, ready to hop on one more plane and begin her hoop dreams at the Evelyn Mack Academy. In fact, almost no one ended up at the Evelyn Mack Academy. It was little more than a facade. It was only after her first season at Vanderbilt that her visa issues bubbled up. And as a result, Blessing, who was in the midst of chasing her dream playing basketball, was sent back home to Nigeria because of her invalid visa.
You heard of the dream team? Well, we're the mean team.
Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel here. It's me here, Comrade Lavender here, and today I'm back with another anti-capitalism YouTube true crime deep dive video. Today I want to do the files of Pure Evil, the basketball industry, and the NBA sports files, deep dive, capitalism, college sports exploitation, class action lawsuits, NBA cheerleaders, body shaming, low pay, money-hungry capitalist pigs, domestic violence problems, etc. So let's get started into this YouTube video topic. But before we get started, all my YouTube videos related to this YouTube video right now will be on the screen. My other YouTube videos, if you'd like to check the other YouTube videos that I've made that are related to this topic out. So let's get started into this YouTube video topic. The National Basketball Association, which dates back to 1949, wields monumental power with 450 players and 30 teams, each one of them, as of 2018, worth over $1 billion. It's one of the most lucrative sports empires of all time, thanks in part to players like Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and Steph Curry, just to name a few examples, Michael Jordon, etc., plus a few forward-thinking stance on gender and race. The league has earned a cult-like following that grows each and every year. In 2017 alone, the league's 1,200 plus games attracted more than 1 billion TV viewers on TV and ratings, 21 million attendees and A-list celebrities in courtside seats nationwide. The fan base has become so vast, in fact, that the analysis have begun predicting that the NBA will soon eclipse the NFL's fan base, stealing the converted micro of America's sport. NBA players wanted their rights as workers. Capitalist pig owners were standing in the way. NBA players are well paid today, but that wasn't always the case and wasn't always so. As the new labor history of the league shows, pro basketball players had to unionize and threaten strikes to get out from under the thumb of the owners and win a bigger piece of the financial pie. In 1983, just weeks after Ronald Reagan broke the air traffic controller strike, the National Basketball Players Association, the NBPA, threatened to work stoppage of its own. The move ultimately proved successful as the National Basketball Association, the NBA, became the first U.S. sports league to adopt revenue sharing plan, guarantee players a 53% slice of the financial pie, the economic pie. In exchange, the owners got their converted salary cap, which placed a ceiling on player play. The players are holed up in the dressing room at the old Boston Garden, and the owners are livid and angry. The Lakers owner, Bob Short, had someone relay a message to the dressing room with the players, which is basically tell them to get on the court. Bayer sends back a message telling Bob Short to go F himself. The players stuck together. It was an incredible act of courage at a time when the league wasn't as strong as it is now, and players didn't have the same stability they do now. Hyson had to work a job in the off-season. Those players were really putting in their livelihood on the line, but it worked. This set the stage for the Flesher and the players going forward. This was 8 years before baseball went on strike. It's a seminal moment when the NBA union started negotiating in 1982/1983. There had just been a baseball strike in 1981 and a football strike in 1982. The NBA players are looking at that, and they're preparing for a possible strike when they start negotiations because they've seen it work. They're all kinds of working off of each other. Every negotiation in the history of sports involves the owners, the capitalist pigs, crying about poverty. The NBA tried to propose some salaries limitations. The owners did. The players said no. There were some legal mechanisms, and eventually it moved forward. The players wanted a share of the revenue and wanted free agency. The NFL players had just gone on strike to get a percentage of gross revenue from the league. The NBA players tell the league that they want to look at the league's books to see if the economic situation is really as bad as it's making it out to be. By 1982, Magic Johnson and Larry Bird are in the league, so the future looked bright. The NBA agrees. They start bargaining again, and the players say they're going to go on strike in April. Why is that timing important? The playoffs are about to start, and that's when the real money and profits, the capitalism profits, starts rolling in. The owners go nuts at first. They refuse to meet with the players, and the owner of the San Francisco Spurs is threatening to sue his players. College basketball treats fans to one of the most exciting tournaments in sports. Basketball and other sports, full of dazzling skill and dramatic upsets. Under capitalism, however, alongside all this sports and excitement and entertainment, is a dark underbelly of exploitation in sports. This is readily apparent in college athletes and in colleges in particular, and it's even worse for women. However, there is a growing movement being taken up by the players to change this through trying to organize a union. The NCAA has exploited black athletes since its 1906 inception. This includes both college basketball players as well as football players and basically any athletes in college. The NCAA also exploits their athletes by setting up and enforcing unfair and unnecessary rules and regulations in order to maintain full control over them. Upon agreeing to accept a sports scholarship from the NCAA, athletes also agreed that the NCAA has the right to take the scholarship away and rule them ineligible to play for the NCAA if they break any of the rules or regulations that are set in place. NCAA sport was built upon foundational racial inequalities of American society and higher education. White colonizers and later Americans established the first universities and colleges on the U.S. soil on stolen land from indigenous peoples and built and paid for these institutions using the exploited labor and profits extracted from black enslaved people. The NCAA though insists that all of its players are student athletes motivated by the love of the game, so on they'll be working for free. Most fans of college football go along with the pretense, looking past the fact that the NCAA makes nearly $1 billion a year from unpaid labor. So by refusing to pay athletes, the NCAA isn't just perpetuating a financial injustice, it's also committing a racial one. It is not just the pros team at all levels. College and high school men's and women's are stocked with African players. The NBA has leaned into this over the years, sending regular delegations to hold camps in Africa and recently teaming up with corporate partners to launch the 12-team Basketball African League. But as his African peers celebrated at the Oracle Arena, Clifford, a 7'2" mountain of a man from Nigeria, watch the finals in New Jersey, or check that he says maybe it was in Texas or maybe it was in Pennsylvania, he is forgiven for his hazy recollections because he was left homeless and has been wandering ever since he was recruited to come to the United States to play as a 17-year-old in 2015. Since the school he was attending closed down, he has lived in 7 different states, including New Hampshire, where he was staying in a shelter and had several run-ins with local law enforcement and the police departments. He has gone to the public library and escaped the cold and was unable to understand the commands barked by the local police when they asked him to leave, and ended up being dragged to the ground by 4 officers and subdued with a taser. He is a representative reminder for all of the basketball players from Africa who make it big. A much larger group comes to America only to be victimized by corrupt coaches and recruiters motivated by a big Capitalism Profits payoff. A year-long 60 Minutes investigation followed the Africa to U.S. basketball trail. An inescapable conclusion: it is littered with corrupt fly-by-night high schools and shadowy, shady, sketchy middlemen and academics that misled families, run roughshod over immigration rules, and sometimes commit federal crimes, says Scott Rochner, a professor of sports management at Columbia University. It's very much like the Wild West out here. In another case, a woman named armed with a visa issued by the school, Blessing left her country with fully stuffed suitcases. She would later learn that the stately domed building in the Evelyn Mack website was, in fact, an image of the Barker Engineering Library at MIT, but that was just the least of the lies, as Blessing found out as soon as her flight landed. Coaches at Eastside had somehow obtained the rights to have Blessing play for Ghosts rather than Evelyn Mack Academy. Blessing says she doesn't know how exactly. The likely explanation: middlemen paid Evelyn Mack Academy to issue Blessing a visa so she can enter the United States, and when she arrived, they routed her to the school of their choice. By attending a different school, Blessing was in violation of immigration rules and in the country illegally, but as a 15-year-old, she didn't know it at the time. Middlemen, coaches, and legal guardians often ignore the rules of the U.S. I-20/F1 visa, which requires a student to attend only the school that the issues was on the visa. It is possible to change schools, but only if you follow the set rule of guidelines, which rarely happens. It turned out East Side High was awash in dubiously recruited international athletes, while Blessing was placed to live with a female coach at the school and have a good experience. A year-long New Jersey advanced media investigation would later reveal that some of the internationally recruited male athletes were forced to live in dangerous and unstable apartments, including one above a drug user, and East Side was hardly the only school in the country bargaining for African athletes' talent as if it were a commodity. In another different middleman, the Middle West recruited 2 teenage basketball players from Africa and became their legal guardian. Once they arrived in the United States, he made the 2 boys, who have since found new guardians and are playing in college, sign a contract entitling him to 40% of their future earnings. So when the Department of Homeland Security realized Mack had issued 120s for more than 75 international athletes, suspicions were aroused and the scheme quickly unraveled. Mack had been charging middlemen and coaches throughout the country $1,000 for an I-20. Most of the overseas athletes never made it to Mack, but were instead redirected to other schools, just like Blessing Ivor. In Charlotte, Smith charged Mack with conspiracy to harbor aliens. She would plead guilty to 1 charge. Her school was shut down, and she was sentenced to 18 months in prison. One name in particular surfaced in the Evelyn Mack court documents: Aries Hines, a former junior college basketball player in Oklahoma. Hines was involved as a coach and recruiter for the bogus West Virginia Prep Academy. He purports to have been a force for good in that case, telling a local TV station that he cooperated with investigators and was never charged criminally. He then moved to North Carolina. He became an operator in youth basketball culture and became a legal guardian to players who came to the U.S. and Africa. According to police reports, used Evelyn Mack I-20 visa to bring 14-year-old Nigerian athletes to the United States upon players' arrival. He allegedly used fake custody documents to enroll him in a nearby North Carolina public school instead. When the boys sought to get away from him and get away from his control and seek new legal guardians, police say he made threats by phone to the new guardians and reported to authorities that the boy was here illegally. The high school he attended was forced to vacate its wins. More as multiple former Evelyn Mack basketball players from Africa interviewed for the story cite Hines as a figure who brought them to the United States. Solduli Dumba, a 6'11" center for Ivory Coast, recalls that Hines promised him a quality education, room and board. Instead, he was crowded into a small house, and he said that he thinks he did him wrong. In fact, numerous players and families from both the United States and abroad have claimed Hines has mistreated and misled them and falsely advertised them, charging them as much as $9,000 in exchange for education and basketball opportunities, little of which actually happened. In the course of looking into Hines, investigators executed a search warrant on his residence. According to public records, they found his business cards listing him as a head coach at Riverside Academy, as well as a business bank account he set up in the name of a school, a small academy in Linton, North Carolina. According to school officials, he never even worked there. In 2016, Hines was charged with 8 felony counts of obtaining property by false pretense. Police reports say he took more than $27,000 from at least 8 families of young athletes. When Evelyn Mack Academy was shuttered as a result of the federal charges, the players scattered, and most of their visas were now invalid. Most of the foreign students were forced to go back to their countries in Africa. After reapplying multiple times and losing a full year of practice, Blessing was finally granted a student visa to come back to the United States and is now a starter at West Virginia. In the 5 years since legalized sports began spreading across the country in the United States, student athletes have reported regularly receiving abusive messages from gamblers on social media, including death threats, death wishes, and threats of violence as a whole. The FBI agent told ESPN that it considers threats of sports athletes on social media to be a growing issue. The study found that 1 in 3 profile athletes receive abusive messages in some form from someone with a betting interest. That higher profile events with sports betting marks attract increased volumes of abuse or threats. It found that 90% of harassment and bullying is generated online or through social media. During March Madness in particular, it looked at nearly 1,000 division men's and women's basketball student athletes, 64 teams, and over 280 coaches, and 120 NCAA match officials. They found it across the division, men's and women's basketball championships, over 54,000 posts / comments were flagged for potential abuse, bullying, or threats and reviewed by human in-house analysis. Of those 54,000, 4,000 were confirmed as abusive or threatening and social media platforms, with some elevated to law enforcement and police. More than 540 abusive, betting-relating messages were directed at men's and women's basketball student athletes, including death threats. Another interesting aspect is that women's basketball student athletes received approximately 3 times more threats than men's basketball student athletes. NBA dancers reveal culture of brainwashing, unfair pay, and eating disorders running rampant in the NBA dancers. NBA dancers are unhappy with their pay. The NBA's skyrocketing revenues aren't trickling down because trickling down economics doesn't work. Reportedly, some dancers make roughly $25 to $28 an hour for twice weekly practices and $175 per game. Teams allegedly don't cover the dancers' health insurance either. Cheerleaders, or dancers as they are called, for the NBA, for the Knicks, and for the Brooklyn Nets will pull in $200 or less a game and receive no health benefits or health insurance coverage from those teams. There's no way to live off that money. A former New Jersey hype team member who now cheers for the NBA said, "Of all the things that Lauren Hendriksen remembers about her year as an NBA dancer, it's the broom closet that rattles her the most. My coach would make me sit there before games like I was in a timeout, and if I was doing anything and everything I could to lose weight." A dancer, Lauren from the Milwaukee Bucks from 2013-2014 recalls for Yahoo Lifestyle. Basically like a child in timeout, basically. When her coach thought she looked questionable or had gained weight-wise, Lauren said she instructed the dancer to put on her spandex uniform in order to perform a jiggle test in front of the whole entire team. She'd come up and grab underneath my butt or on the side of my belly. Lauren, then 18, remembers. She'd be like, "Lose 5 pounds tomorrow and you'll be fine." Well, Lauren is opening up here for the first time about the full range of bullying she says she faced in the hands of her coach. Illinois' native who is no stranger to speaking out, in 2015, she brought a class action lawsuit against the Milwaukee Bucks, alleging that the dancers, after covering costs of required beauty routines like spray tans and manicures, hair extensions, were effectively paid as little as $3 to $4 an hour, according to interviews with her lawyers. The Bucks, a team that brought in $87 million in revenue that year, strongly denied the claims but agreed to settle, paying a total of $250,000 in lost wages to roughly 40 dancers. Lauren spoke openly to the press at that time, explaining how the weight restrictions left her dehydrated and starving herself to fit into the uniform, and waitressing at Ruby Tuesday to pay the bills. Her story, then and now, ran into a stark contrast to the public images of the NBA dancers, 20 or so per team, who seemed to ooze effortlessness, glamour, and beauty. Elite athletes in their own right, they strut onto the court at halftime with a pluck and poise of a Broadway symbol. They appear on Instagram and social medias, sparkling in sequins, and on Facebook, kicking in heels, they're fierce but polished, with near-constant smiles. The NBA dancers, whether most people realize it or not, play no small part in the sport. The squad's arrival in the late 1970s helped transform NBA games from mere sports to events to showtime, a term coined by the Lakers owner who first introduced the idea of dancers. The night I made the team, management pulled me aside to say they were concerned about my weight, says Alana Serba, who danced for the San Antonio Spurs from 2011 to 2012, the year the Spurs decided to disband their dance squad, opting for a more family-friendly image and alternative. On a bin of uniforms from the year before, and I might be a solid size 6, but the girl before you might be even smaller, and you had to fit into the uniform, and that's your uniform now, so good luck. Madison Murray, who danced with the Phoenix Suns from 2012 to 2015, shares a similar story. Right after I made the team, they told me I had to lose 10 pounds. She says, "I was probably softer than I should have been, but it still eats at you. I never felt good enough. I did weigh-ons daily, and the coach would sit us down and go over everything, from our hair to our makeup to our body type to full-on top and bottom." The dancer called Anna Breeze, a dancer for the Charlotte Hornets, formerly the Charlotte Bobcats, from 2004 to 2008, because often you come in an audition and you have to stay the way that you looked when you auditioned. And many women said the level of body shaming hinged on the dance coach, which meant a handful were lucky to have loose weight regulations. My team would regularly take laxatives before performances just to be able to eat regularly. Multiple women said the obsession with body image in the NBA motivated them to choose a career as a trainer or nutritionist later in life, to work towards stopping the perpetuation of unhealthy body image and eating and toxic dieting culture. One of the biggest goals is to empower women about their bodies, says Chanel Young, who danced for the Utah Jazz from 2010 to 2013 and has been directing the NBA's international team, which travels to games in Europe since. I don't think everyone thinks a tiny 90-pound girl is sexy, so I don't understand why the NBA thinks everyone needs to be that weight. There's perhaps no one better suited to talk about pay than Lauren Huntington, the only dancer known to get a lawsuit to get more money from the NBA, but even that, a $250,000 settlement split among roughly 40 dancers, likely did little to offset the money they put into their work on the team. According to the Milwaukee Bucks rulebook, which Lauren shared with Yahoo Lifestyle, dancers must conform to all image standards set by their coach. This might mean, Lauren says, that women with short hair would be required and forced to get hair extensions, and according to the rulebook, visit the exclusive hair salon of MBD. According to the Maine Society, the Hairstyles Hub, hair extensions can cost anywhere from $200 to $3,000, on top of what the dancers said were troubling low salaries. 3 described the rule book that mandated they perform for free at charity events throughout the year. One of them was Kendra Dunn from the Dallas Mavericks. NBA's domestic violence problem. Kevin Porter Jr. and other instances. NBA's latest domestic abuse scandal has flared up after Kevin Porter Jr. was charged with a felony count of assault for attacking his girlfriend. Kyrie Gonzalez. The assault allegedly happened at a New York hotel, leading Gonzalez to phone the police. The charges are for second-degree assault, which is a felony and could result in jail time and his NBA career being terminated. Miles Bridges was arrested in June 2022 for assaulting the mother of his children in LA despite avoiding jail as part of a plea agreement. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation and banned without salary for 30 games by the NBA. Jeffrey Taylor, the ex-Real Madrid basketball player, was suspended for 24 games and 18 months of probation following assault with malicious destruction in Michigan. Taylor pushed a woman out of his room and she was found with marks on her arms and a head injury. He did not cooperate with officers when arrested, and Darren Colson incident happened in 2016 when he was arrested while competing for the Sacramento Kings. He was said to have been assaulting his wife at their home, leaving her with visible injuries. Colson pleaded guilty to domestic battery and received 20 days in prison, as well as 3 days in formal probation and a 52-week offender program, alongside with community services.